I'm here today with Lani Muelrath, who wrote three amazing books. I have to show them. This is The Mindful Vegan, we have The Plant-Based Journey, and we have Fit Quickies. Ooh, love that one. Thank you, first of all, for being here today. I really appreciate your time because I wanted to talk a little bit today about your book, The Mindful Vegan.
hmm
So,
Well, I'll always make time for you, Jean, because it's just always, we never run out of things to talk about.
no,
So I'm very
this is
happy to be
true.
here.
This is very true. So, we've got Thanksgiving coming up. It's perfect time for doing this because although I love the holidays, they're great. You get to see family, and sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not. I'm going into because nobody in my family eats. Just my husband and I eat this way,
Yeah.
plant based,
Yeah.
and we're going into basically a minefield. And for us, it's tough because you're seeing foods that have been part of our tradition of our family for a very long time that have not been plantized, in terms of the recipe itself. So you're seeing foods that traditionally you would normally scarf down, but not anymore. So what can we do to handle these temptations, these holiday treats?
Yeah. And, this question is, getting is so much. This week alone, I've had, it's obviously on everybody's mind because as you say, there's a lot of layers. There's expectations of family, expectations of gift giving, do I or don't I? Then there are the celebrations where we're tenuous about what's going to be available to eat and how do I navigate all of that. So let's address the temptations, and we can even look at cravings a little bit and see how we can navigate cravings as they come up. But my number one piece of advice for handling these temptations at any time of the year, they just seem to come to a head at this time of year, is to be sure that we're not positioning ourselves so that foods are highly interesting to us. And the way you do that, and this is a secret to how I lost those 40 pounds 20 years ago, was by being well fed. And that means not going hungry. That's not the same as eating enough. There is another layer to it. And that means that within a few minutes of hunger signals during your day, it's really important to address that, be a good animal, and eat from a variety of quality foods until you are satisfied. And this means that then the next time you are hungry, you can't say, oh, I'll wait a couple hours or I'll wait until the party this afternoon. Because what this does is it drives up biochemically, it drives up your body's interest in high fat, high sugar foods, and also heightens our interest into those foods that we just find so, so tempting. So when I tell people eat enough, they go, oh, well, I always eat enough and I eat too much of even quality food, because the real missing link is the on time part, especially for those of us who easily gain weight and are reluctant to let go of excess weight. I found that when I abandoned eating according to someone else's schedule and paid attention to my hunger and fullness signals and that's mindful eating at its core. That's the foundation. There are other elements to it, but that is the foundation, is being connected with your hunger and fullness signals. And for those of us who are career dieters, such as myself, that's a challenge in itself because I was not accustomed to that. I ate according to whatever the rule du jour of the diet du jour was. So I really can't encourage people enough to do that. So that also means that we need to be prepared with quality food in variety, in balance, wherever we are throughout the day. And when we're doing all of these busy we're shopping, we're still doing our work until holiday, maybe there's a break that comes up, and then we have these extra engagements. That means we have to go the extra length of having those foods with us so we don't arrive hungry and unprepared. Then all those temptations, all bets are off, right?
Well, it's kind of like the, Mammy and Gone with the Wind. She
Yeah.
made Scarlett eat a tray before
Yeah.
she went to a party.
Yes. And of course, that was so she wouldn't look unladylike, but we just know it's because we don't want to be miserable and overfull later on and eating all those things least conducive to where we want to be with our health and our bodies. So,
Well, it's the inner raccoon that comes out for me, you know. So, got to keep that inner raccoon at bay, at least. So, in your book, the Mindful Vegan, you have a chapter on mindful eating. What does eating mindfully mean?
yeah. Well, other in addition to what I just suggested, because Jean, I bet you and many people that are watching this program have heard about mindful eating or read a book on mindful eating. And the instructions are all how to set up your table so that it's a really nice environment, have your table setting, don't have any distractions, how to chew your food a certain number of times. And these are all external pushes that can be kind of like a diet. And if you have not taken care of mindful eating number one, which is taking care of your hunger on time, then it can be really hard to moderate all these external behaviors. So to me, mindful eating is first making sure that you're eating enough on time, being prepared with quality food, and then also connecting with restoring the pure joy of eating by really savoring and enjoying each bite. It's surprising how much tension we may have built up around food, especially come from several different kind of regimens where there's all kinds of rules around it that has built in this anxiety and tension. And mindfulness as a practice, as I teach it to the mindful vegan, helps you become connected with your own senses of disquieting states around food or anything else in your life so that you can navigate it more skillfully and be present with it instead of being reactive to it. So this means that actually by cultivating mindful living, which means having a degree of mastery over our habits of thinking, this translates directly into mindful eating through making our choices, through paying attention to our body's hunger and fullness, and all of it. And that's what restored my relationship with food, eating, and my body after decades of going up and down in my weight, being actually at war with my body, which career dieters are. When I learned to find that little bit of space between reactivity and habits of thinking, I could cultivate a new relationship with all of this, including food and eating.
I'm still on that journey.
Yeah, well, it's a
But
journey for all of us. So we get these things incrementally, but it just goes to show us, Jean, we have not set aside time or been taught how to navigate our habits of thinking in this way. We've only been giving new rules to live by, told that we need to do some stress reduction and not to worry about XYZ. But how do you not worry about things if that is your habit? And that's what the mindfulness process allows you to do. You navigate all that in a whole different way.
yeah. Well, you talk about cravings. I call it my inner raccoon. Okay, that it comes
Is that
out.
explain that? Is that because raccoons just go on and want to gnaw
Raccoons
everything?
are going to go for it regardless. They're focused. They're 100%. If there's food in the area, they're going for it. So that's my inner raccoon coming out. I call you call it cravings. I call it my inner raccoon. It's coming out, baby.
Yeah. Okay.
So you talk about three. In your book, three things that can cause cravings. Can you describe them for me?
Yeah, and I wanted to, for those people who have a copy of the book, here's what she's talking about. It's day 25, where the focus is on cravings. And we know research tells us that there are three sources of what we call cravings. And sometimes it's something that we just escalate into calling it a craving. So that will become a little bit clearer as I explain. So let's look at those three reasons. The first cause of what we might call a craving is due to deprivation. And deprivation can come in two ways. One is because you're hungry. If you're deprived of enough fuel, and remember from the opening of our conversation, that means that you need to pay attention from early in the day with being tuned in to your body's hunger signals so that you meet the need. That means don't delay half an hour, 45 minutes. You actually need to meet the need now. And this has a cascading effect through the entire rest of the day when you do that. So that's a first cause of cravings. If you are deprived of enough food and on time, then you're going to experience cravings, which actually, by the way, you're just hungry. And it has so many layers of anxiety attached to it, especially for people who are trying to manage their weight, because hunger can sometimes be like the enemy. We're so accustomed to waiting it out, trying to delay eating or just ignore, suppress it, or even medicate it in some ways. And by that, I mean drinking something so we can fill our stomach or something like that. So deprivation first is in having enough food. But deprivation has another face, and you already mentioned it because you talked about all of the holiday favorites. So if we have cut off ourselves from our traditional, through the whole year, actually, our taste favorites, which depending on your culture is going to be different. You and I probably have different favorites than each other, being from different parts of the country, not to say people from different parts of the world. What's interesting to me and is a traditional comfort for me is going to be different from someone who was raised in Japan, for example. But the nice thing is that I have found what is helpful is instead of just cutting those things off, is to find the replacements, the whole food plant-based replacements for those traditional foods so that you can have that satisfaction. And I think that, what did we talk the other day about nut mac and cheese, or, if mac and cheese.
Right. Yeah, having a mac and not cheese. Yeah.
So that's an example of a replacement. And this holds true for the holidays as well. So if you can find, whether it's the sugared yams or cranberry sauce or some kind of breaded pudding or even pies, there are so many things that you can just search online and find replacements for these, rather than have the deprivation in that way continue. Find a way to support yourself with the flavors that you love. So deprivation is the first kind of the source of cravings. And honestly, if you take care of the first phase of deprivation, I can't say that's enough, which is feeding yourself on time with enough, 99% of all the problems with craving are going to dissolve. That's the single biggest thing. And I know this from experience. This is what allows me to, like I said in the Mindful Vegan, go into the pantry and start preparing dinner and notice that there's chocolate that's been sitting there for 2 weeks and I forgot about it. Now, for me,
not going to happen in my house. No.
For me to forget that there is chocolate in the house tells me that there was so much hope with this mindfulness practice that I'd taken up, along with making sure that I was eating food on time and not getting any stored hunger. So if we take care of that door number one, then the other two causes of cravings are just such a small part and are easier to move through. The second one is environmental cues. So, and you just mentioned that, walking into the family, the celebration, the traditional holiday meal.
Oh yeah, because I'm going to walk in and there's going to be an entire table, and I'm not kidding, with potato chips and corn chips. I mean, those right there, Cape Cod potato chips and Frito-Lay corn chips. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know that the salt is going to cause issues. I know it's going to make my blood pressure go right up very quickly, as with the oil. But I'm addicted to them. I'm very, very addicted to them. So help me.
Well, yes, this is where the feeling that I don't want to get sidetracked from the environmental cues, but this is precisely where it comes in. Because with the mindfulness practices, as I teach it in the Mindful Vegan, you learn to become present with your, not only the moment and what's happening, which at this instant is being confronted with all of this goodies that have some kind of pull on you. But you also learn how to pay attention to what that feels like in your body. Now, last time you and I had a conversation, I believe we talked about the smoking cessation. Did we not talk about that?
Yep.
And that has been, mindfulness training has been more effective than the freedom from smoking program with the American Lung Association. Just to refresh for people who may not have seen that program, more effective than the gold standard to the American Lung Association at smoking cessation. And we all know that smoking is truly an addiction. So there's no debate about that. So what the people in the mindfulness training group in this, without going into all the details, because people can refer back to that. And maybe you could do that in the link, go back to the details of that other study. They learned that when cravings arise, that rather than reacting, moving into reactivity, which is the war ensues, I should, I shouldn't, and it becomes like a really intense battle. You learn to become accustomed to what actually craving feels like in your body, which is a whole different way to approach it. So if you have eaten enough food, you don't have any stored hunger, and that you've been eating like that for days and weeks and months.
Right.
When the high interest of environmental cues comes up, you can notice, oh, this is an environmental cue, because I really know that if you're not pulled, if you're compelled by hunger, it's going to pull you in. But if you can see it as an environmental cue, and you've learned through the mindfulness training that I do in the Mindful Vegan, you can just go in and see, what does this feel like in my body? It's like a leaning forward, it's like a tension, it's a reaching, and you start to pay attention to what it feels like. And guess what? In a few seconds, if you put all your attention right at that present moment, instead of getting caught in the story of I shouldn't have that, I don't want to have that,
Right.
these things dissolve because you have brought yourself into the moment instead of getting caught up in the age-old battle of wanting to eat things that you know you shouldn't, or that you're desiring not to.
Right.
So this is how environmental cues is a cause of interest in food, but how with mindfulness, you can find a new way to respond to that and to not to react. And this is what led to my ability to be around chocolates and other foods without, and being able to bypass them or notice, oh, that's interesting, and then moving on. This was like a miracle to me that this could happen. So this is what the practice brings to you. You start to learn these different sources of cravings. So that's the second one, is environmental cues. And the third one is from emotional reactivity. Now, notice I didn't say it's from emotions. It's from emotional reactivity. In other words, we have, most of us, practiced ways of reacting to emotional discomfort or disquieting states, which can be happy or sad. It can be anxious, it can be excited. That was certainly my situation, where any kind of emotional upset or upheaval was uncomfortable to me, and so I took refuge in the food, as it were.
Absolutely. Yeah, the comfort foods.
Yes, so it was a way of moving away from the discomfort of that reactivity. Now, if we look back to what I just said about environmental cues, when we have emotional reactivity, with mindfulness, you learn to be present with whatever emotions are arising in your body, because they actually have a physical correlate. We all know that there's a feeling to anger, there's a feeling to happiness, there's a feeling to excitement. Well, we call them feelings, right?
Right.
It's because
Right.
they have a feeling to them. And yet, no one has taught us how to navigate those feelings in a way that is non-reactive. So if we look back to one of the opening quotes in the Mindful Vegan, the Viktor Frankl quote,
Yeah.
where he says, and I say this probably just about every interview because it's so instructive to this process, that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space, there is a choice. And in the choice lies your freedom. Mindfulness practice is a process of growing that space around what is a stimulus and what is our practiced, habituated reactivity so that you can respond in a better way and live more skillfully. So this is directly applicable to if, for example, for myself, emotional reactivity for me was to reach to the food. Once I stopped under eating and could take care of the primary source of cravings, then I could navigate that inappropriate response to emotional reactivity to reach to the food. Now, other people have different ways of responding to emotional or reacting, to emotions. Some people are just compelled to zone out online. Some people start obsessing about their diet or exercise program. And some people just get overproductive at work and just can't tear themselves away. These are all ways of reactivity to emotion that helps us avoid being present with what it actually feels like. Mindfulness practice teaches you to be present with that and then watch it dissolve instead of pushing it away or running away from it.
Wow.
So those are the three. Yeah, it was a long answer, but it's kind of the crux of the matter. And so you can see how we can escalate things into what's a craving. Like environmental cue is interesting. Oh, I want to say more about environmental cues, by the way. This is actually being aware of food in the environment is actually an a evolutionary adaptation for survival. Because think of it, if a wild animal is moving through the woods and they're not really tuned in to what might be a source of food, then they might walk right by it and not do an important refueling. So this is really a good thing that we have, that we're tuned in to when there's food in the environment. But we tend to turn it on ourselves like, there's some weakness of me or I have a craving. Well, first, just because you notice it doesn't mean you have a craving for it. Then if you find out there's an interest in it, if you're well fed, you're going to have a far better chance of being able to navigate that biological instinct of finding compelling food interesting in a better fashion. So this is why I am so excited to bring this message of mindfulness to all of us who have had some kind of struggle in this department, because it was linchpin for me. After 30 years of struggle, it just made the difference.
Wow. Well, thank you. That was great. Um, the holidays seem to be busy. There's, you're shopping, and oh my gosh, how many parties? Let's have a party, and it's like, oh my God, I got 3 this week, and and then you just feel this stress that you're trying to do everything, to be with everyone, to meet with the family, and especially if there's stresses within the family, like, oh, well, we have to go here for this family, and how do we go over to visit with this side of the family, and to be, there's just so many things that are going on. Plus, you're trying to do and be within your normal job and day-to-day living. So you've got all these additional stresses. I mean, they're fun, it's all good, getting together with the family and Christmas and Thanksgiving and all these good holidays. But what can we do? Because sometimes, the stress just overwhelms us.
Yeah.
What can we do to help? What's your advice for dealing with this stress?
Yeah, you brought up something really good, Jean, because you talked about kind of the family. It's almost like they want to make sure they get equal time, right?
Right.
And this is where, and of course, what comes up is this taking care of your own needs and care of yourself. And we go, how do we do that? How do we take the little bubble of whatever, whether it's time or attention, to make sure that our needs are met? Because it's easy to get frazzled. So one thing that I found helpful is there's a really short, something you can do in 5 or 6 seconds that's called stop. And I have this in the book too. Let me show that it's for people who have their book. Stop is, and I'll break it down for everybody. It's on page 85 in the Mindful Vegan, and it's in day 9. And as I've been describing in our conversation, that with the mindfulness practice, which is it's really very simple to learn, and it's non-sectarian. You don't have to believe in anything. There's oodles of research studies out, thousands of them now, about actually what this process does for your brain so that you can restore equanimity. You can get out of the busy mode of your mind. And I want to, before I teach stop, I want to dive into that just a little bit because it's hugely relevant to what you just described. Most of the time, as it turns out, research tells us our minds are wandering.
All the time.
Well, actually, they did a study, and it's detailed in the Mindful Vegan, by the way, about how they tested to see how much time our minds were wandering during the course of the day. And as it turns out, it's about 50% of the time. The other time is when we're focused on an activity. You're working on a project, you're involved in a book, it's something that's got your attention here and now. So people say, well, then what's the problem with wandering mind? This is the problem with this unchecked wandering mind. First is, we all know what it's like to have our thought process hijacked. And most of us actually are experiencing that all the time, and we don't even notice it. A thought comes into our head, we take off with it, whether it's, reflecting on the past, catastrophizing about the future. We don't even check it. We don't even have an understanding that this may be problematic, just to go with every thought that comes down the pike. As it turns out, when we do not have some degree of mastery over that choice, which is what mindfulness training does, you end up moving into these parts of your brain where you start to excessively ruminate, which means you start chewing on a thought or an idea, regretting a past, worrying about the future. Excessive ruminate, I really can't say it better than excessive rumination. I think we can all interpret what that means. This hooks other neural activity in your brain that pulls you into parts of your brain where also reside sadness, cravings, addictions, obsessions, depression. So if, in other words, we are not doing some kind of training and getting mastery over this constantly running with whatever comes down the pike, we're actually inviting ourselves into brain states that are the very problems that you and I are talking about right now.
Wow.
This is the value of this training. So if you start to see that it's actually a way of being, as you start the practice and you start to realize that you don't stop thoughts when you're doing mindfulness practice, you become aware that they are there, but that you don't have to go with every one of them. And more frequently, you get better at making a choice if it's something that you want to run with or not. Like I said, usually we're not even aware of it. We're just off and running, and then we start feeling agitated and anxious and maybe sad or depressed, or cravings come up. So I wanted to explain that to set up stop, because remember I said there's the wandering mind, and it's called the default mode network. There's actually a name for it that neuroscience has, of getting lost in these just wandering mind. And there's concentrated mind. Now, concentrated mind can also be thinking about the past. If you're reflecting on, let's see, I taught this lesson yesterday and it didn't really go well. How can I improve it? That's focused, concentrated thinking. That's not spinning a story in a loop.
Right.
It's just like planning for your holiday or your meal coming up. That's designated, that's concentration. So when you move from this default mode network, wandering mind, into concentrated mind, it's like switching tracks with a train. You can't be in both places at once. So when you do, that's what happens when you're doing mindfulness practice. When you take a few minutes each day to actually be right here, right now, watching the breath, you are making a decision for those few minutes. You are going to do your utmost to keep bringing your attention out of wandering mind. And it's going to try to take you out.
It does. I can't. It keeps coming after me. These thoughts, and it's like, oh yeah, I got to do that. No, I'm focusing on this. I'm breathing right now.
Exactly what it is, and that's all it is. The practice is bringing your attention back over and over again, because that's how you start to get skilled at it. And sometimes still, 10 minutes later, oh, what have I been thinking about? But you're sharpening the tools of bringing that attention back repeatedly. Now, there's a way. This is why the formal practice is so important, for a few minutes at least each day, because you're setting aside the time to actually be, you can't go to the tennis match without practicing your backhand, right? You've got to
Right.
practice in it. But there are also ways to remind yourself through the course of the day, in little ways that will check you right out of wandering mind into the present and help restore that sense of just being in the present instead of caught up in, and especially this time of the holidays, what a huge benefit. So that's what STOP is. So STOP is an acronym for 4 simple steps that you can do this in 5 or 6 seconds. You can take a longer time, of course, but it's something very quick that you can do intermittently throughout the day to shift yourself out of the track of wandering anxious mind into the present. So STOP, S stands for stop. So even if you're driving, it doesn't mean you have to stop the car.
Okay, good.
Mentally, you come right here, right now. You can be cooking and stop. You bring yourself right here, right now. T stands for take a breath. So simply take a breath or two. And the way this brings you into the present is, remember, breathing takes place in the present moment. You can't breathe for yesterday or for tomorrow. So when you bring your attention to what it feels like to be breathing, you have drawn your attention into focused concentration. And that's why we use that tool during formal practice time. O of STOP stands for observe. Observe what is the state of affairs right now. Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling happy and relaxed? Is your mind going a mile a minute trying to plan those 3 different events that you have to go to this week? Just observe, what does your body feel like right now where you're sitting on the chair? Can you feel the weight of your body on the chair? Can you feel if there's tension somewhere in your body? Just observe what's going on. So remembering again that how you feel emotionally and physically is taking place right now.
Do you respond to that?
That's what the response is, to be present with it, rather than our usual habit of how can I make myself feel better? Oh, I think I'll do, I'll zone out on Facebook. And that's very common, that people get a little uncomfortable, anxious, and this takes us right away, because guess what? Social media is based on distraction. It's like wandering mind built in with tech support. And so there's an urge to do that. So this is exactly what you do. What you do with it, Jean, is you be with it. You become you acknowledge and accept it, which doesn't mean you proliferate it. It means, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. I'm feeling tired right now. I'm feeling happy and excited. You actually navigate it with your attention and acknowledge it, instead of running roughshod through the rest of your day where tension builds and builds and builds, and then good luck later on. And then the next step is P for proceed. So then you move through the rest of your day with maintaining some degree of mindfulness about being more in the present moment. So remember, if you're noticing that there's what's going on with yourself physically or emotionally, your job is not to try to change it or fix it or make it different. Your job is to simply see, can I be present with this and see what it feels like, rather than being caught up in reactivity. So the opposite of reactivity is just presence with. So stop, and you can really do this quite quickly. And it's really a great tool. And I would suggest that people either set a timer on your phone or your computer that you do this, or connect it with some things that you do every day. Every time you brush your teeth, implement stop. When the phone rings, implement stop. when you do any kind of a task, when you let the dog out, when you're getting your food out to prepare dinner, when you're at the stoplight, when you're in a line at the market. There's just many opportunities through the day that you can bring yourself out of the wandering mind and bring yourself back into the present. And I want to make it clear that wandering mind is not like, it's another good evolutionary adaptation, just like the environmental cues thing is a good evolutionary adaptation. And the way has been helpful to us is it is that part of us that's on alert, because to survive, we need to be aware of the dangers. We need how to designate the snakes from the sticks. It's just those kinds of dangers aren't usually present for us. And we figured out a way to proliferate every other kind of thing that comes up as a big danger signal and kind of get lost in it. So stop is a really good takeaway from our talk right now. So for people that move into the holidays. So try it. Yeah.
Definitely I'm going to be stopping, going through. So as you said, the stop, within that, is that something that can help give us a sense of calm throughout the busyness of the season?
Yes, because what it's doing is it's bringing you out of the danger zone of excessive rumination. If thinking back to the wandering mind can, if it's left unchecked in the default mode network, it can start to lead to that excessive rumination where you're thinking in loops, whether it's anxiety about, being at your relative's house with the holiday thing or anything in your life. So the minute you remember, it's like switching tracks. The minute you concentrate on something, and it could be actually anything, will bring you out of it. But what you're doing is bringing yourself to some bit of self-awareness too. This helps unobscure your natural calm, happiness, peace, and your capacity for having more equanimity through the rest of your day, because what you've done is moved yourself out of all of this anxiety potential. That isn't how it ends up working. That is how mindfulness practice ends up helping you through the course of your day. It's not that you become this enlightened meditator and now all of a sudden nothing bothers you. Mindfulness practice does not take away life's challenges. It simply gives you new tools with which to navigate them, so that you're basically doing what we've described over and over again, is learning how to move out of these anxious states because you have some kind of mental training to not just be jerked around by everything that comes into our minds.
Boy, and it's true too, because it can hijack your mind.
Know.
It really can.
Yeah.
It really can take it over.
Yeah.
And you just get into this endless loop. And so here's some great tools, some great tips, always great advice from you.
Thank you. Yeah, you do start to become aware, very aware that, oh, I'm starting to get caught up in this. Oh, I'm getting upset about that. Oh, I have a reactivity about that. I'm starting to really notice it. All these things become to awareness so that you can actually more skillfully make change. That's, instead of just trying not to do, you actually get down into brass tacks without having to psychoanalyze. You don't have to tear anything apart to figure out why have all these problems because you're the middle child.
Well, and I do want to talk about one more thing in your book. I really like how you break it up into the days and you talk about the practice, and then you also have an audio link that helps people to guide them through. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was really, really helpful.
Thank you. And I hope you get a chance to listen to those soon. The reason I set up the Mindful Vegan in a 30-day plan is because I wanted people to really start with these tools of practice from day one. As you know, day one, I give a lesson and I suggest
it's short.
1 minute.
Yeah.
Day 2 is 2 minutes. So this is, instead of having people go, oh, this is a really good idea, this has promise for me, I'll do that someday. I wanted it built. And, I'm a teacher, so I want to take what's a complex problem and break it down into doable bits.
Right. And you did.
And thank you. And along the same lines, I wanted to increase support, so I created 30 audios that are companions to the 30 days, and those are downloadable from my website. So it tells you right there in resources in the back of the book where to find those. So for people who want another extra tool, I'm with you there. Day one, it's a minute-long recording. Day two, 2 minutes to kind of lead you through. So there's another tool for you. And I also have some of them loaded up to Insight Timer, which is a really good app that you can have on your phone too. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, that's really, there's a really popular response to that. People like the extra assistance those are providing.
They're great. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, and always a good time. I always learn so much from you.
Okay. Thank you, Jean. You're just a delight to talk to, and you have the best questions. So thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you, and you gave me some tools to navigate Thanksgiving. So
Stop.
all right. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.